Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our financial check-in with FAME webinar. This is part of a webinar series that we offer the first Friday of every single month at noon. And so we're glad that you've joined us. If you haven't joined us for a financial check-in before, as I said, it is a regular webinar, and our previous webinars are recorded and available on the website. So we hope that you'll check those out. My name is Mary Dyer, and I'm a Financial Education Programs Manager at FAME, and I'm thrilled that you're here today. I'm being joined by my good friend and colleague, Mila Tappan. So you want to say hello, Mila? It looks like we've got, I don't know,
11.
11 or so participants. So Mila, you want to just do a quick intro and then I'll continue on?
Yeah, so I'm Mila Tappan, Manager of College Access and Outreach at FAME, and excited to be here with you today and with Mary. As we go through this today, it might be helpful to know that Mary and I have worked together for a very, very long time. And prior to joining FAME, we worked in the financial aid office at the University of Maine together. So a lot of our insight and all of that comes from that experience, as well as the fact as we've had our own kiddos go through this process. So
Yes,
I'll
yes.
send it back to you, Mary.
Great. Thank you, Mila. So yes, Mila and I both are parents of adult and college age and beyond children. So my youngest is 18. So I have the youngest of the four kids that we have. And but we've been through all of these things that we're going to be talking about today. And later on in the presentation, we're going to give you some bonus tips and what I'm calling kind of our lightning round. And so Mila and I will be able to share different tips that we've heard along the way, and you'll be hearing them throughout as well. So as I said earlier, we are recording this presentation. It will be made available on the FAME website, and I will email it to you with the slides. So no need to frantically take notes. We will make the information available to you. And again, this is part of a series, so we'll talk about the upcoming webinar at the end. One of the things that we did or tried to do in creating this presentation is we wanted to address these concerns around preparing for managing finances and paying for college, regardless of where your child may be in their sort of life, regardless of whether they're a fourth grader, or, they're in eighth grade or in high school, or maybe you're thinking about pursuing higher education yourself. So we're really trying to frame this so that it fits everyone, but of course that's difficult. That being said, we have a ton of resources on the FAME website and other webinars that are recorded or events that are upcoming. If you have a high school senior or a student who's closer to attending college, Mila and the College Access team has a ton of resources available to you, webinars, videos, just a lot of great and one-on-one counseling. So again, we're just touching on some key tips, but if you are kind of in that phase that your child is headed to college, we have a lot more to help you. So I encourage you to reach out to us, and we'll provide you with our contact information at the end as well. So today what we want to do, as I said, is we're going to talk about 5 tips to help you prepare for education after high school and managing finances. Briefly, I'm sure that most of you have heard of FAME. You're here today. But just real quickly, we are a quasi-independent state agency that works to provide financial solutions and help Maine people achieve their business and higher ed goals. Mila and I both serve as part of the College Access and Financial Education team. And so as the name kind of indicates, our focus is on helping Maine people pursue education and training after high school and build financial wellness along the way as they're working toward that. So today what we want to do, our goals are really to share information, resources, and as I said, some tips to help you prepare and to strengthen financial wellness, not only for yourself, but for your child. It's really hard to winnow this down to 5 steps. We could probably spend an hour on any one of these, and so we're going to do our best to fit this all into an hour. But we tried to really focus on those key 5 steps to provide to you today. Obviously, focusing on your financial fitness is a huge part of this, both for yourself and your child. Creating a conversation and talking about these things early on is really important, whether you're talking about college going or finances. So we'll touch on that. We're going to focus a fair amount on savings, and Mila is going to dive into some of the savings options that are available and really provide you with some information about that, specifically debunking some of the myths that are out there regarding savings. She's also going to give you some tips and strategies for researching schools from a financial aid perspective. The basics about financial aid, but again, we have lots of resources to give you more later on if you're looking for that. And then we'll have like I said, the lightning round where she and I will kind of provide you with some information as well. That again, 5 tips were tough, so we had to add a bonus category for sure. All right, before I get started, Mila, I saw there was something in the chat, but are we good to go?
We are good to go, but people can please ask questions in the chat if you haven't.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, Mila. Go ahead and add any questions, tips that you want to share. Just say hello, whatever you would like in the chat, and Mila and I will both be monitoring that along the way. So the first step we want to talk about, and one of the things I find myself doing in these presentations is over and over saying, this is the most important one, or this is the critical one that you need to focus on. And so I'm going to try not to do that with all of these tips, but they are all equally important, and really focusing on financial fitness and financial matters, regardless of where you're at. As I said earlier, the age of your child, whether they're in 2nd grade or in 12th grade, really focusing on your financial wellness is critical. And also, regardless of where you're at in terms of your financial fitness, we're all on a continuum of improving our financial knowledge, our skills, our behaviors, and there's always room for improvement. So this is something we really want to focus on very early, and again, regardless of where you're at. So again, timeline matters, but you really want to, if at all possible, think about ways that you can begin paying off any debt and reducing any of your current financial obligations. Again, if you've got a child that's closer to college, or you're planning to attend college yourself, speeding up that process would be better. But any actions that you can take to pay off debt, whether it's credit card, car loans, reducing your mortgage payment or getting your mortgage paid off, anything that you can do at all is helpful. Now, I say all of that recognizing that costs continue to increase and that it's increasingly difficult to do that. But as Mila will focus on, every little bit helps when it comes to savings, and every little bit will help in terms of reducing debt. The closer that your child is to college, it's also a good strategy to avoid taking on any new debt or big purchases. And again, these aren't certainties or rules of thumb that work for every single family, but avoiding that for many families is a good idea as you get closer to paying for college. Another strategy, and I think that people are getting better at this all the time, and that is to consider ways to increase income. The days of where you worked your 9-to-5 job and that was how you earned money, and that was the only way that you earned money, that's kind of outdated, and more people are finding ways to increase their income, whether it's through a side hustle, whether it's using online resources or social media to sell some of the unwanted items, or sell some of the things that maybe you create, that maybe you have a talent and you're selling things on the side. Maybe you're offering lessons. Maybe you love landscaping and you want to help people with that. There's a whole variety of ways. And I think one of the positive impacts of the internet and social media is it's easier than ever to do that. And so think about ways to increase your income. And I say you, but I also mean your child. So if you have a high school student, that's something that they should be doing as well. Definitely thinking about ways that they can work and earn money during vacation, and summer vacation in particular is going to make a difference in terms of money that you then have available to pay for college or use for savings. Another thing, and this is one full confession I am terrible at, and that is to complete an annual checkup of your fixed monthly expenses. The reason I'm bad at it is to do it well, it's time consuming. Because what I mean when I say annual checkup is I want you to think about all of the bills that you pay every single month. your car payment, your cell phone, your internet provider, your electric bill, maybe your credit card bill, all of those monthly fixed expenses, your insurance, whether it's renter, car, homeowner, all of those things that you pay every single month. Really, to get the best deal, we need to be doing research at least annually and negotiating annually. Unfortunately, your power company or your cable provider or internet provider isn't probably going to call you on the phone and say, hey, Mary, did you know that you're paying more than you should? So you've got to do that legwork. What I have found for myself and many consumers find is that when they do the research, they can often save hundreds of dollars. And I will say car insurance is a place where I absolutely have saved big. And so I encourage you to do that and then take that found money and divert it into a college savings plan or paying off debt. But it is an activity that you need to do fairly regularly because things change and costs change, and there is an opportunity to save if you do the work. So as I said, paying off debt, considering ways to increase income, doing that annual checkup of your fixed expenses, those are all ways to free up money for college savings. One of the tips and strategies that I implemented, and it was really kind of a panic approach in a way. My son was in middle school, early high school, and I had been saving for college, but I hadn't saved as much as I would have liked to. And I was really starting to see kind of the time horizon of where we were at and sort of in a panic. And so one of the strategies that I used is I took every single dollar that I could possibly manage and I diverted it into a 529 into his college savings account. And it was tight for those 4 years of college, especially. But what it did is it allowed me to really boost the savings toward the end of, as he was leading up into starting college. What I then did once he started college is then I had gotten into the habit. I'd gotten used to not having that monthly contribution into his 529 account. And what I did is I then diverted that money into the tuition payment plan that I paid the college. So as much as I could psychologically begin to sort of rely on not having that monthly contribution, I tried to do that and then diverted it later. So that's a strategy that worked for me. It might work for you. I say that with the full recognition that none of the families that we work with, ourselves included, are able to save enough to pay the full cost of college. It just wasn't realistic for us and isn't realistic for most, but it did make a big difference in terms of reducing the amount that we had to pay when it came time. And Mila's going to show you some examples of that. Obviously, creating a budget, a spending plan, again, probably in terms of annual checkup and creating a budget, those are the two that are a little more time consuming, but they can really pay off. So really sitting down and looking at what you have available to spend, what your monthly expenses are, and making a plan for your spending can really help you along the way. The other thing that I like about creating a spending plan, and I think that's a nicer way of describing it than a budget, is it gives me permission for certain spending categories. If I have my budget account for my concert ticket spending, when I go to buy concert tickets, I've saved for that. I've made a plan and I've given myself permission to spend. So creating a budget is another key strategy as well. I also would encourage you to talk to an expert if at all available. I've mentioned the wonderful experts and counselors that you have available at FAME when it comes to financing higher education and filling out the FAFSA, but also perhaps reaching out to your financial institution and speak to, many of them have financial coaches that will help you. Sometimes talking to another individual, and I encourage the expert part of that, can be helpful. And I'm not suggesting that you go out and hire a financial planner per se, although if you can do that, that's great. But there are lots of community resources available and a lot of experts available that you might be able to sit down with and kind of go over things and go over your budget. We've already talked about creating that plan to save in terms of, freeing up money, but as you're creating that budget, building in savings into that budget, creating a college savings budget, or a budget that what it might look like when your child is in college is helpful as well. But making a plan for that is really important. Think about any opportunities that you might be able to boost that savings, whether it's tax refunds, maybe a pay increase, if your salary increases, maybe you've figured out a way to increase your income a bit, or you've paid off debt. And so you've got this available money. Create a plan for that money, because what so often happens is when you do have found money in your budget, perhaps you've paid off your car loan, if you don't make a plan for that, it generally gets absorbed into the discretionary spending. So you definitely want to make a plan and try to stick to it. Automating your savings is incredibly helpful. The idea of, setting it and forgetting it, we don't really want you to forget it. We want you to adjust it over time, but having that automated savings takes away kind of the inertia and sometimes the time that we have to set things up. So go ahead and do that if you can. And then last but not least, and this really, I think, is a conversation to have with your child as well. And it applies to sort of that college going process, but also finances in general. And that is to not try to keep up with the Joneses when it comes to financial wellness, spending, and college decision making. And I say this because, you can't really judge a book by its cover. And sometimes we look at our family, our friends, people in our community, and we think, wow, they've got a lot of money. Look at all the things they have in their house, and, wanting to try to keep up with that. Or maybe your child is applying to some selective colleges and they're getting a lot of pressure in school about the name brand, and which school have they applied to, and is it selective, and is it, the school that is sort of going to garner a lot of accolades from their peers. Really, at the end of the day, things don't always appear, or things don't always actually end up being as they appear on the surface. Often people who have, the big house and all the things that you're trying to keep up with have a lot of debt as well. And often, the colleagues or the peers of your child, as they're in high school and as they're comparing college choice, they may be taking on a tremendous amount of debt in choosing those schools. So I think having that conversation with your child, that things don't always appear as they are on the surface, and avoid trying to keep up and trying to compete with those around you when it comes to spending and purchases, because 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10, what you see isn't always as what it appears. So the next thing I want to share with you in terms of financial fitness is a free online financial wellness tool that we make available to adults and students here in Maine. Fame.enrich.org is the website that individuals use after they've finished college. And then down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the high school and college student site. It's fame.igrad.com. Essentially, what this is an online educational tool to help you learn more about money and financial decision making and your behaviors and money mindset. It is paid for Maine people by Fame. So when you sign up for it, your name and information isn't going to be sold to a third-party company. You're not going to be inundated by a bunch of third-party marketing. We pay for it on behalf of the state of Maine. And it's a wonderful tool in the sense that once you create an account and you complete your financial wellness checkup, when you log back into the tool, it's going to serve up content to you based on your circumstances and what you indicated are as your financial stresses and challenges. So really the key steps: create an account, fill out the financial wellness checkup, complete the money personality tool. This is one of the tools that we highly recommend. Helps you get a handle on your money mindset and your money personality, because we know that it's not all about knowledge. It's also about behavior and mindset and psychology. That is what so often drives our financial decision making. So we encourage you to use that, and then complete a course, check out some of the articles and videos. It's a great way to extend your learning, and I encourage you to share it if you have a high school or college age student as well. A couple of other resources that I wanted to share as well that are more career focused. As you're having conversations at home about finances and colleges and careers with your child, we've got a couple of great resources that we want to recommend. Encouraging your child to explore various career pathways and think about their interests early on, as early as middle school and younger, is a great step to take. The resource that we recommend that we created through FAME is claimyourfuture.org. Claim Your Future is an online resource that allows students to explore various career and educational pathways, and it allows them to actually create a monthly budget and simulate that career and salary in terms of their monthly spending. So we encourage you to check that out. And then the other website that is offered through the US Department of Labor is Career One Stop. And Career One Stop is wonderful because it allows you to look at virtually any career and check out the median income, the skills that are required, the job duties, and the job outlook as well. So if your child is interested in a particular career, but you want to know how many jobs will be available in the future, that's a great place to find that information as well. So the next thing, as we move out of the financial fitness piece, I want to talk about creating that conversation early and often. And this really applies to not only financial matters, but the college, the college exploration process and the college financing process. We know that for many of us, talking about finances is still a relatively taboo subject in the household for a lot of families. But the reality is, we also know that the majority of adults learn most of their or many of their financial behaviors at home. And what they don't learn at home, they often learn through trial and error. So as much as possible that you can begin having conversations early about finances and college options, the better off your child will be in making those decisions and their financial behaviors later on. There's a study that gets cited quite often from T. Rowe Price that 3 out of 10 parents said that they would rather talk about the birds and the bees than money with their child. And I absolutely think that that is the case. I think it is something that we steer away from. And I think for many of us, it's because perhaps we're not in the best financial shape. So we don't think that we're a great person to talk to our child about money, but they're learning from you whether you're talking about it and teaching it or not. So having those conversations early and often are really helpful. I also would encourage you to think about, as you get closer, if you have a child that's entering high school, to think about your own attitude regarding college costs and debt. And there's no right or wrong answer here, but college debt has really gained a lot of attention lately, and college costs have gained a lot of attention lately. And there's increasingly more conversations about whether it's worth it. Mila and I are both here to tell you it is still absolutely worth it. But of course, the path that you take and the costs that you incur are a huge factor. There are still ways to do it without taking on a tremendous amount of debt. We're not going to dive into all of those today, but I think thinking about your own attitude and dialogue in the household around college costs and debt are important because, again, you're teaching whether you realize it or not. I think setting some real expectations and boundaries around your ability to contribute and what you can offer. And we're giving you permission right here and now. And I've said this to parents on the phone, we're giving you permission to say no. If your child has that one school, their heart is set on one school, and that is a high cost school with not a lot of financial aid, and it means a ton of debt, depending on their career pathway, it's okay for you to say no. Don't be afraid to set boundaries and set expectations. And if you feel comfortable being really candid about what you can contribute, I was pretty clear about that. This is what we can offer every year. And as you're looking at colleges, know that this is what we have at play from our college savings and our ability to contribute. And being really clear about that, I think, is a great strategy. And it's okay to say no. Just like you say no about ice cream before dinner, it's okay to say no and set boundaries in terms of college decision making. talk about the impact of student loans, and even better, show them the impact of student loans rather than saying, oh, you'll be saddled with debt. Show them what $30,000 or $50,000 in student loan debt looks like over time. There's lots of great calculators online that can help you with that. You can show them the monthly payment. We have a debt salary calculator on the FAME website that will allow you to put in a certain amount of debt, and it will tell you the salary that you need to be able to afford that debt. Show them what those numbers look like. High school students in particular and beyond, they can understand that. And so it's helpful to show them that impact. And then lastly, getting the entire family involved. This was another one. It's like confession today. I wasn't good at the family meeting, but we have a colleague who she had family financial meetings and would sit down and talk about the household financial goals and the household budget. And she had a time set aside. I don't know if it was once a month or once a quarter, but maybe that's a way that you address it. And if you set aside the time, you'll stick to it. Getting the entire family involved in the conversation is helpful, and having those regular meetings can be very useful as well. We all have very limited time, so sometimes if you schedule it, it's going to happen. And then in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Mila, but I want to touch on a couple of things. As I said, a lot of conversations around college costs and student loan debt, and a lot more concerns around that. We also equally hear from parents who went to college themselves, or even stakeholders that we've talked to who have made comments like, well, I was able to earn enough money in the summer to pay my tuition. They shouldn't need student loan debt, or why are they taking on all of that debt? The reality is that in this day and age, for most students, not all, and there are absolutely exceptions to this, nowadays, earning enough money in the summer to pay the tuition and fees, let alone room and board, it's simply not realistic. Now, if you have a child who takes advantage of free community college, or they earn a lot of money in the summer, maybe they're a lobsterman or lobsterwoman and they earn a bunch of money, there are exceptions, but for many families and students, it's not realistic. Now, that being said, we want them to earn money in the summer for books and supplies and miscellaneous expenses and that new laptop, whatever it may be. But we simply do not have the luxury nowadays, with costs as what they are, to earn enough money in the summer. So what do? Savings is absolutely a key component and can make a huge difference. As I said, you're unlikely, as most of us are, to be able to save every single dollar, but every single dollar will help. And, unlike what maybe you've heard, I'm hoping you haven't heard the myth, it is not going to have any impact on your financial aid. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mila, because I am a big fan of showing versus telling people. Mila's going to actually show you the numbers so that you can actually see that it's not going to have an impact. But before that, she's going to go over some of the savings options that are available for you for college. Mila, before I turn it over, any questions or anything that in the chat that we want to address?
Nope. I think we're all good there, Mary. So we still continue to welcome questions, though. So
very good. Thank you so much, Mila.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mary. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about now, to be honest with you, we could do 2-hour-long presentation. So I'm going to go pretty high level. So certainly ask your questions. We'll either respond to them live or in writing, or we have other sessions that we'd love to have you join us for that go into a bit more detail. But I wanted to start off by talking about the fact that there are multiple ways to save for higher education. At the end of the day, we just want people to start saving. But at the same time, if you can look at your options and talk with professionals, or, whatever might be the case, to make sure that you make an informed decision so that your savings benefits you to the maximum amount, that would be great. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about these, but I just want you to say very high level, 529s are accounts that people use to save for higher education. That is their purpose. Where 529 comes from, if you went into the IRS tax code and you looked up section 529, it's where they talk about these plans. Basically, the way that they work is you put in after-tax money. The money hopefully grows over time. And if you use that money for higher education, you don't have to pay taxes on the earnings. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But they're very flexible and a good way to save for higher ed, in our opinion. Coverdell accounts are very similar in terms of how they work, but Coverdell's are a little bit more restrictive. You have to open the account by the time the child is 18. You have to use the money by the time they're 30, and you can only put in $2,000 per year. I think many people are familiar with savings bonds, and savings bonds are another way to save. It's actually where I started with my oldest, who's now 28. But what we found with savings bonds is they were nice and secure. So there's that peace of mind, but you're not going to make a lot of money. And when inflation is happening, it's been hard for those to keep up, but still a very good option under certain circumstances. There's also something called a Roth IRA, where it's a retirement plan. You're putting in money, again, after tax, which is different than a lot of retirement plans, but you can take a distribution from that retirement plan without penalties once you hit age 59, and you can use that money for college. So one of the benefits of doing that is that retirement plans are not listed on the FAFSA at all. So it's a way you can save, and it doesn't even show up on the FAFSA. But as I'm going to show you in a moment, a lot of stuff that you save doesn't have any impact either. People can also use regular savings accounts. I think probably in terms of the best ways to save, it's probably not at the top of the list, or regular investment accounts, because they do potentially have a little bit more impact on financial aid eligibility. But they're very flexible. And we have a lot of people out there that they want to be sure they can gain access to that money. So for that reason, we do have them on the list. And then the last one I wanted to mention are what we call UGMAs and UTMAs. In my opinion, I am not a financial advisor. I am a financial aid advisor. These are my least favorites, and it's for a variety of reasons. These trust accounts basically go to the student when they become an adult. They have full control over them. They can spend the money on whatever they want. And when it comes to filing the FAFSA, unlike 529s and Coverdell's, they are counted as a student asset, not a parent asset. And it's always better when people are going to save in a way that it's counted as a parent asset, not a student asset. So 529s, Coverdell's count as a parent asset. Savings bonds count as whoever owns them. Roths don't show up at all. And then savings accounts and investment accounts are in the name of whoever owns them as well. Okay. So very high level, I know, but there's a lot more information on the website. There's a great site, Just Saving for College is literally what it's called, has a lot more information on these options. But I did want to start just by highlighting some of the most common options. Okay, Mary? All right, but one of the things that I think is so important to talk about, Mary teed it up very nicely, is what actually has an impact on financial aid eligibility. So when people go to file the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid that we need everybody to file, because that's how schools determine eligibility for federal and state financial aid, and often their own money, what really impacts it? We get that question a lot. Well, the reality is that the FAFSA, and therefore financial aid eligibility, is really driven by income. It is income that is the primary consideration when we're determining what financial aid eligibility is going to look like. When people file a FAFSA, what happens is there's output, all the various pieces of information, but there's this number. And currently it's referred to as the EFC, or the expected family contribution. But we've got a new FAFSA coming in December, so I'm making the transition now. That output is going to be called the Student Aid Index. So that Student Aid Index is a number when you submit your FAFSA that you will see. Behind the scenes, the Student Aid Index is made up of 4 things: student income and student assets, and parent income and parent assets. Far and away, the biggest factor is parent income. So what I wanted to show you today is just to take 4 families and with differing income levels and show you what their SAI would be based on the current formula. So everything is equivalent in these families. I've got a family of 4, married couple, 2 kids, 1 in college. And so what you can see here is if we have a family, assume they have no assets. If they're making $60,000 a year, then their parent portion of their SAI, which is coming all from income, is about $2,500. If a family is making $80,000, that's going to be about $6,000, a little less than $6,000 that formula figures the family can contribute to higher education. But look what happens as the income starts to go up. the SAI goes up dramatically. And this is, in my opinion, a flaw in the formula, but they don't ask Milo what she thinks when they redo the formula. So a family making 100,000, the formula expects that that family can contribute almost $12,000 per year, or that's available to help pay. And then last but not least, for a family that's making 120,000, look at what that number is. We talk a lot about, should we share this, or is this going to scare people half to death? What we want you to know is that, yes, this can be a little off-putting. Don't let it be. Instead, say to yourself, well, what am I going to do to make sure that I have as many options as possible, and there is a way for us to afford higher education? Two big ways of doing that: savings and school selection. So we're going to focus on both of those. But knowing these numbers, I think it's important for families to know these sooner rather than later. Mary and I have spent so many years working with families that the first time they have a sense of what that number is going to be is senior year of high school, and they're just not prepared for it. And I am seeing the comment that the third way seems to be like getting a divorce. I am going to chuckle at that because there is this part of me that agrees with you. Although Mary and I made it through college and we're both still married, even though it probably did cost us more for our kids. All right, Mary, I just clicked on my thing and it didn't go anywhere. So Mary's driving the presentation. So now what I want to show you, though, is that if we take this one family that's earning 100,000, so their SAI that's coming from their income is almost 12,000. What happens if they have assets? How much impact are those assets going to have? Now, a couple of really big caveats up front. One is that not all assets count. So when filing the FAFSA, you do not list the value of your primary residence. So your home is off the table. You do not need to worry about the value of your home at all when applying for when filling out the FAFSA. You do for another form, but not for the FAFSA. It has no impact on federal student aid eligibility. Okay. Additionally, any money that you have in a retirement account is excluded. So you remember a moment ago we were talking about Roth IRAs? The reason that those don't show up on the FAFSA at all is because all retirement plans, official retirement plans, are not asked about on the FAFSA. You exclude those. Okay, so keep that in mind as we're looking at this. And then another caveat is that families that earn under $60,000 per year, starting with this FAFSA that's coming in December, typically do not have to provide any asset information. Additionally, if you've got a family who's receiving any of the means tested federal benefits starting in December, receiving any of those benefits, forget your income, receiving any of those benefits means that you do not have to provide asset information on the FAFSA. So those are things like TANF and WIC, main care. But I'm going to tell you a little secret. And if you don't have a child that's a senior in high school, I think they're probably going to fix this or change this before you get to the point that you're going to apply. But one of the other means tested benefits is free and reduced lunch. We have schools where everyone is eligible for free and reduced lunch. If your student, for right now anyway, I think they'll change this. If your student is at a school where they're receiving free and reduced lunch, you can answer yes to that question and you will not have to provide your assets. Okay. So that's the way that it is right now. I think at some point they'll probably take that one off the list for that reason, but for this upcoming year, that is on the list. So let's look at what happens. So we've got the family that's making 100,000, no assets, that almost $12,000 SAI. What if they have 10,000? Let's just keep it simple. They've got their home, they've got their retirement, and they've got $10,000 sitting in the bank. Virtually no impact on the SAI, less than $600. What about they have 25,000? Okay, a little bit of impact, but not that much. And what if they have 50,000? I mean, that's a pretty good chunk of change, right? Yes. Does it have an impact? Less than $3,000 in impact, though. Now, I would any day of the week rather be that family that has $50,000 in savings or in a 529 or whatever my method might be. I would rather sacrifice a couple $1,000s in aid, potentially. It doesn't mean it's actually going to be the case, but potentially to have the options and flexibility that I have by having $50,000 in savings. So often we still hear this. We've been working on debunking this myth forever, that people think that when they save, they're shooting themselves in the foot financially. And that is just not true. When people don't get enough financial aid and they happen to have saved, they think it was because they saved. The reality is that for those families, if they hadn't saved, they probably wouldn't have gotten any more aid. What's preventing them from getting more aid is there's not enough aid in the system. But by saving, they still have options available to them. So again, as Mary said earlier, it is not about saving everything. I sure as heck wasn't able to save everything I wish I had been able to for my kids, but any amount can make a difference. I really, really can. When you're putting together your piecemeal approach, which we're going to end with, or you will find that any amount is going to help. So every little bit is really important. So we really hope people will think about that and consider doing that. So as promised, I want to come back and talk about 529s a little bit. And here in Maine, our 529 program is called NextGen. I hope that you are familiar with NextGen. I certainly hear the ads all the time. And so I hope that it's something that you're already familiar with, but I just wanted to highlight a few very, very high level things about NextGen. So a NextGen account, again, what it is it's where you put in after-tax money into an account. You'll have a variety of investment options available to you. You'll get to choose the one that works best for you. And then hopefully your money will grow over time. As your money hopefully grows over time, that one of the tax benefits is that you don't pay taxes on that growth, on those earnings, as long as you use the funds for higher education, for those qualified higher education expenses. And what I like about 529s in general and NextGen in particular is that they're really flexible. So for example, on the next slide, what you're going to see 529s can be used for. So 529s can be used at any accredited post-secondary school. So we're not talking just here in Maine, in-state or out-of-state, public schools, private schools, 2-year schools, 4-year schools, graduate schools, even many certificate programs now. I mean, this program is very flexible and it continues to get more and more flexible over time because people recognize that we don't need everyone to go get a 4-year degree. There are all of these other pathways that we want some students to pursue. I mean, we need everyone doing everything. And so 529s are becoming even more flexible. For matter of fact, did you know that if you are someone here in Maine, we have people who are interested in maybe going to school in Canada. Maybe they have dual citizenship, and that's even a more affordable option. 529s can even be used out of the country as long as it's a school that partners with the Department of Education, and many, many schools in Canada and in Europe do as well. So really flexible in terms of which schools these funds can be used. Additionally, really flexible in terms of what expenses are considered qualified expenses. So for example, tuition and fees, books and supplies, not surprising, but computer equipment, any other required equipment, and room and board, which is a big one. So even if they're living off campus. So really, really flexible. So we wanted you to know that. And then we wanted to talk about what my favorite thing is about our NextGen program specifically. And when I say ours, we administer it at FAME on behalf of the state of Maine. And we have some great grants that are available. So for example, when you open up a NextGen account with $25, you automatically get a $100 initial matching grant. If when you set up your account or later, go back and decide to do automated funding, have it come out of your paycheck or just out of your bank account on a regular basis, after you've made 6 consecutive monthly payments, you get a $100 automated funding grant. We know that when you set it and forget it, as Mary said, even though we don't want you to totally forget it, that's what's really effective. So we encourage that. And then there's also the Next Step matching grant. So every single year, accounts get reviewed to see how much money was put into those accounts. And then at the end of the calendar year, again, every year, there's a 30% match up to a total of $300 per year. So, you know, I look back now over my kids and that $300 a year that's been going in year after year over the course of 2 kids has been really, really impactful. What I like best about all of these 3 grants is there's no extra paperwork. You basically just set up the account, you put in the money, and automatically all of that gets reviewed and those grants appear in your account. In order to qualify, either the owner of the account or the beneficiary just has to be a Maine resident. So say you were living here in Maine and the beneficiary is going to be a resident, but maybe it's a grandparent out in California that wants to set up the account, these grants are still applicable. The last thing I want to mention about these grants is that they're not just for kiddos. 529s can be opened by anybody. So if you're sitting here today yourself thinking about, wait, gee, maybe I'd like to go take a few classes or do whatever, you could open up one of these accounts. You qualify for all of these same grants. You could be both the owner and the beneficiary once you're 18. And you could receive these, and you don't even have to be a matriculated college student. You just have to take your courses at an accredited institution. So I can go to Husson or UMaine and I could take a class and use these funds to pay for that. So really exciting for our kiddos, but also really beneficial to those of us who think we need to brush up on some skills. All right, I know I'm moving along quickly, but I just want to make sure we get everything in today. So we want you to save. That's really, really critical. But another significant piece is researching schools to find schools that are going to be affordable. I would love to sit here today and say, hey, just go wherever you want. I am one of those parents who said no to my kiddo. His first year, he did not go to the school that he wanted to go to because we felt like financially it was not going to work. It wasn't going to be a good fit. And so he went somewhere else and then he transferred. It all worked out really well. But my point is that, like Mary said, sometimes we do have to say no because some schools are really, really unaffordable, I think, to some families. So schools do vary tremendously in the amount of financial aid that they have available. But I just want to start by saying that there are different types of financial aid. So we break them into two broad categories. There's what we refer to as merit-based aid. That's usually the aid that's awarded by the admissions department or maybe the athletic department if you've got a really talented athlete, or maybe it's from an individual department at a college. That's based on who the student is what they bring to the table. So a student who's really strong academically, the admissions office might say, hey, we're going to give you a $4,000 scholarship for all of the 4 years that you're here as long as you keep your grades up. That's an example of a merit scholarship. Then there's need-based aid. Need-based aid is the aid that is determined by the financial aid office typically. So when we used to work at UMaine and we get calls for, why didn't my student get a merit scholarship? We'd have to send them over to admissions because what we dealt with was the need-based aid that was calculated based on the filing of the FAFSA. So the FAFSA, again, free application for federal student aid. We need everybody to fill out this form. This is how students apply for federal financial aid. This is how students apply for state financial aid. And it's how most schools award their own financial aid as well. Some schools do use something called the CSS profile. Only in Maine, only Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby do. But if you hit the Boston area, more schools do, excuse me. FAFSA normally available on October 1st, delayed until December this year. We'll be back to October 1st next year. The CSS profile is available on October 1st. So just a really basic thing about how every financial aid office out there calculates a student's need. They say, what does it cost to go here? And that cost might range from $12,000 at one school to over $80,000 at another school. But they're going to take their cost, subtract out that SAI, that output from the FAFSA, and that's where you're going to see how much financial need a student has. Now imagine we live in a world where every school fills 100% of a student's need. That's what schools want to be able to do. All of them would love to be able to do that. And if they all did that, guess what? It would cost you the same regardless of where the student went to school. But that isn't always what happens. But Mary, if you go to the next slide, you can see theoretically, if we lived in that perfect world, how that would work. So at a lower cost school, we're looking at, let's say, around this amount. Your student aid index is going to be the same at every school, but your level of need is going to be very different. So that's important to know about and to understand. Sometimes students will get a scholarship from a very high cost school and it will look like it's amazing. You're going to get a $25,000 scholarship over 4 years. That seems amazing, but you've got to put it in context. What is the level of need at that school? How much is that school costing? So understanding that, the need is going to vary from one school to the next is another really key piece to this. It's also why we want to focus on something called net price. So Mary, if you can go to the next slide, net price is basically what it costs you to attend, or your student, to attend a school for a single year after grants and scholarships. So as crazy as it sounds, in reality, we don't really care how much a school costs. And that sounds silly, I know. What we really care about is what's a school going to cost you. And what a school is going to cost you is the cost of that school minus grants and scholarships. We have some schools out there, here in Maine even, where they might be super expensive, $70,000, $75,000 a year. But those same schools can have grants and scholarships, grants specifically, that can approach that full cost of attendance. Now, those are not typical, but that it is possible. So initially, we don't want people to say, I don't want to look at this school because it's super expensive. Because if they happen to be one of those schools that have really, really good financial aid, they may be more affordable than the lower cost school that doesn't have very good aid. So that's why this research is critical. So what I'd love to have all of you to do is check out something called the net price calculator. And what a net price calculator does, each school has their own on their website. It takes the cost of that school, it collects some information about the family's financial situation, and it figures out based on that school's resources what they'd be able to offer in terms of financial aid for a year. Now, these are only estimates. Please don't make final decisions based on that. The FAFSA formula is changing a bit, so I think we're going to have a year where they're going to be not as reliable, but it's still a good way to get a sense of which schools have better aid than others. And that does have to, I think it has to factor in my opinion, because there's lots of options out there. Some other ways to research schools can be checking out the College Scorecard, which is a federal government site, and that has all sorts of great information. But one of the other ones that I want to mention is I just want to be sure that you check out the Big Future site. That's on the College Board site. It's part of their big site. But what I love about the College Board site is you can search on schools based on percent of need met. So a moment ago, why I showed you that chart where it says, here's what amount of need each school you have at each school, and I talked about meeting 100% need, you can actually on the College Board site search for schools that meet 100% of need. So that's what you want to look for. You want to look for those schools that meet a lot of your need. So regardless of whether it's a really expensive school, maybe it's a lower cost school, if they meet more of your need, that's a really, really good thing. So that is one of the criteria that you can use to search for that when using the College Board Big Future site. And in other presentations, we'd actually do an example, but today we're pushing through. And then last but not least, when families finally get their financial aid offers, we want them to do that apples to apples comparison. As I mentioned a moment ago, what happens sometimes is a student will get something from the admissions office. They'll be offered this great scholarship. And it seems like, wow, that must be the most affordable. That's a huge amount of money, more than any other school offered me. But I keep coming back to the fact that what really matters is it's the cost of the school minus the grants and scholarships. That's what it's going to cost you. You want that apples to apples comparison. So we have a worksheet that's available on our website that helps you do that. You can either print it off and do a handwritten calc, or we have one that does the math, where you put in the cost of the school, tuition fees, room and board. What we focus on direct costs. You subtract out the grants and scholarships, and then what you can do is look at school A, B, and C and really figure out which school is, the most affordable or in the middle or the least affordable. Now, don't mistake that. I don't think you should always automatically select the least expensive school. I know you've said, Milo, you've been going down this pathway. Why are you saying something different? Finding a school that's a good fit for a student and having a student actually be able to complete their education is absolutely critical. So we want to put all those things in the mix, and we want to find a school that's affordable, but also a good fit. And that's why researching is so incredibly important. And if students do need to borrow, if you can get by without borrowing, great. But if they do need to borrow, always borrow federal student loans first before anything else. And if you ever want more information on that, we can talk about that more at a different time. All right, so merit aid matters. Here's a big thing I learned when Alex, my oldest, was going to school, is that some of the most selective schools, think your Bates, Bowdoin, Colby, Harvard, Yale, you know what? They don't offer merit aid. All of their students are top of their class sort of kids. Where you will find the best merit aid are going to be at schools that are very selective, but not that top tier, or selective schools. They want to pull in those awesome students that are really strong academically. So in one way of getting them to come is to say, hey, you might have been offered admission at this XYZ school, but you're not going to get any merit aid for them. You come here instead and look what we're going to do for you. So that's a really important thing, especially for middle income families who maybe aren't going to get a lot of need-based aid. Finding those schools that offer good merit aid is really important. So we want to be sure that students apply to multiple schools. I had a student this year who applied to 2 schools out of state, very expensive, terrible financial aid. And at the end of the day, she did not have good choices available to her. So we want to be sure that there are multiple schools, including like a financial aid safety school, just like people do an academic safety school. We want them to have a school that if everything falls apart financially and there's not great aid, that they still could make that happen. Some kids, that's going to be community college. Some students, that's going to be a 4-year school, a public school, but just make sure that there's a school out there that will work financially, even if the aid isn't great. So last piece for me. Oh, sorry, you go ahead. Sorry, Mary.
You want to take a breather. We don't have any questions, so that's good. So we've got like 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes left. We are recording, so if you have to drop off, it's fine. We're going to send you the full recording. Now we just wanted to give some last tips. Some of them might be repetitive. I was going to kick it off, but because I love how Mila talks about piecemeal approach and pie, Mila loves pie, as do I. I think is it coconut cream from Helen's that maybe is
chocolate. Yeah, the chocolate coconut cream with a graham cracker crust.
Yes. So get that pie and pieces of pie image in your brain. And I'm going to have Mila go through the piecemeal approach, and then we'll give you some last bonus tips. I'll share the webinar for what's coming next month, and we'll wrap up.
All right. So the piecemeal approach to paying for higher education is thinking of that pie. So imagine it's Thanksgiving and we got a pumpkin pie sitting there. And if we cut that pumpkin pie into 2 pieces, those are 2 pretty large pieces of pie. Well, when that comes to pumpkin pie or that Helen's chocolate coconut cream pie, that's a really, really good thing. But when it comes to paying for higher education, if your only 2 sources are savings and loans, that's not going to be good, right? Because those pieces are going to be so incredibly large. So what we want people to do is think about having as many pieces as possible when they're looking at higher education, not worrying that every piece like savings isn't huge, but instead that there's just something that can contribute to that. Because if you have that pie cut into 8 pieces, no one piece has to be as large as if you only had 2. So thinking about things like having your savings, making sure your students are applying for those outside scholarships, talking to their guidance office and making sure that they're exploring all of those opportunities that exist. Talking about how much can the family contribute. Like Mary said, I was very clear, especially with our oldest son, this is how much Dad and I can do per year. And so that made the conversation, that difficult conversation that we had, actually he knew it was coming because he knew there was no way we could afford one of the schools that he was looking at and really wanted to attend. So contributions from the family, that merit aid, that need-based aid, both grants and scholarships, thinking about student earnings over the summer. Maybe they're going to go to pay for the books and supplies. That's great. That's a cost that has to be covered. Other types of scholarships, I added outside scholarships and missing that Mary had already added it down here. So that's why scholarships is in there twice. Tuition payment plans. Mary and I took huge advantage of tuition payment plans. Again, we've been saving for college. We took our savings, we transitioned that over to our payment plans, maybe found a little bit extra money to add in there. Tax credits. So in years that I was really on top of things, which was not every year, maybe we got more back in our taxes because we got a tax credit. I would try to take that money and set that aside to help that be some money that was available to help make a payment towards the fall tuition bill. And then, of course, private loans, federal loans. If you have to do one or the other, do your federal loans. But can you see how if you have a little bit of all of these, no one piece, including loans, has to be as large. When people borrow a lot of money, in our experience, it has been because they're going to a very high cost school and they have a pie that's cut into 2 pieces. So with that, Mary, we'll end piecemeal approach.
Sorry, we joined Teams at Fame, and now I have this Teams pop up while I'm doing a webinar. So I got to consider that next time when we start to shut my Teams. So we talked earlier about considering the return on investment of higher education and some of the tools to do that. Mila mentioned the college scorecard that will allow you to get a sense of anticipated earnings and average debt. It's really important to consider both the number of job openings in the field that your student or you are pursuing, and then potential earnings or benefits related to that. And earnings isn't the only factor. Obviously, the number of jobs, where you'll be able to live and obtain that job, quality of life, flexibility. Nowadays, there's so many things that you're considering in terms of the whole picture, but wanting to sort of measure that return on investment. If you have a student who is pursuing a public service path and public service career, keeping an eye towards a lower amount of debt or no debt is a better approach. And then obviously, if on the flip side, if they're going to be earning a higher salary, perhaps you go further on the student loan debt while in college. It's a very individual decision that you need to make. Now, on the public service side, again, putting a plug in for information and resources that we have on the FAME website. If they are going into public service and they have debt, there are forgiveness programs. There's a public service loan forgiveness program. So as you're considering the return on investment, that is absolutely a factor if they're pursuing nonprofit or public service work. But just having that conversation and thinking about that is important. As Mila said, creating as many scenarios and options as possible. That way, if you get into a situation where you're looking at schools or a school or two that the cost and the affordability just isn't there, you have other options. The end goal is that your child, or if it's you, if you're pursuing higher ed, that you obtain a good paying job that you love. Like, that's the ultimate goal. The path that you take to get there, there are many various paths, and it may be starting off at a low-cost two-year school and transferring, taking advantage of lower-cost options, and then going to the dream school later on. Multiple pathways and options do exist with lower debt, in that pathway. So thinking about the ways to achieve that. And then this is one that we've had lots of parents get stuck in. They think about the college financing. They really just worry about freshman year of college. Like, I'm going to do this and pay off this or borrow this amount of loan. And that's all I'm worrying about. You have to remember that it's a 4-year or more plan that you have to have. And if you have multiple children coming up into college, you've got to account for multiple children as well. So think about the fact that this is a multi-year plan. And then a few resources on the FAME website. We've mentioned a bunch of them throughout, but we do have a relatively new financial wellness section on the FAME website with information for individuals and for parents and caregivers for their kids. We have a publication called Build, which is a publication that you can order for free from our website or download the PDF. I mentioned Enrich. Manage is a typo here because that's a second publication that we've renamed to Build. It's not two separate ones. Lots of great tools and calculators as well, animated videos, lots of recorded trainings. And then I think Mila mentioned savingforcollege.com as well, because there's a lot of great resources there. That is just a sampling. There are a ton of resources available on the FAME website. And as I said, we also have individuals that you can reach out to directly and have one-on-one counseling and support, whether it's, applying for financial aid, filling out the FAFSA, or coming up with a plan to kickstart your college savings and open up a next-gen account. So certainly reach out to us. And we're happy to help. Follow us on social media. There's a lot of great scholarships that we promote on Facebook and lots of great tips and resources that we offer on social media as well. Lastly, I just want to mention on October 6th at noon, we will be doing a session, What's Economics Got to Do with It, which will feature our new financial education program specialist, Steve Kautz. So that will be fun. I'm going to call it Economics for Dummies, but I think it's even a little more sophisticated than that. So we're really looking forward to Steve presenting that topic. and the ways that economics, the concepts of economics impact your everyday, day-to-day life and financial decision making. So we hope you'll join us for that. I'm going to leave it at that, Mila. Any last words? We didn't have any questions or anything in the chat, but any last words?
No, I'm just so appreciative of all of you joining us today. And I know this can seem overwhelming. And, I'm planning a trip and I feel very overwhelmed by it. And I just want you to know that we're here to help you not feel overwhelmed. Okay. So just reach out to us. That's what we do. We can help direct you based on where you are in your pathway for you or your kids. So please give us a call and let us know how we can help.
Great. Thanks, everyone.